Hey everyone, it's Tom Karadza, and is the Bank of Canada starting to lose control? Check this out. If you've been following us for any length of time, you know we love following this kind of stuff. But look at these articles. So here is a BNN article. This is back in July 15th. Interest rates will be low for a long time. So this is what they said. Look at the first two paragraphs here. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, is that how you pronounce his last name? Assured Canadian households and businesses that borrowing rates will remain at historic lows for the foreseeable future. Our message to Canadians is that interest rates are very low and they're going to be there for a long time. So don't worry, Canadians. And now look, the Financial Post just came out with an article, August 26th. So this is last week. That sinking feeling, Canadians losing faith in price index, and that has central bankers worried. And then the subheadline here is, if we think prices are rising, they probably will, which means interest rate hikes sooner than the Bank of Canada wants. So there's so much to pick apart here. The first thing is, I don't know which Canadians look at the CPI or the price index. I certainly don't, so I don't know who they're referring to. We all look at prices around us every day. Just, when you go to the grocery store and you see how much stuff costs, or you look in the real estate market and you see how crazy it's getting. So I think we all do that. But I don't think any Canadians reference the consumer price index to decide what's happening in Canada. And then this subheadline that says interest rate hikes sooner than the Bank of Canada wants. And yeah, sure, they should have raised interest rates a long time ago. The fact that they've stayed so low for so long has allowed Canada to pile on so much debt into our country here that the Bank of Canada is absolutely petrified of raising rates. Because if they raise rates, our country cannot make our own interest payments on our debt, so they're going to have to print more money or issue more debt to be able to make interest payments on the existing debt. So they have the right to be concerned. So this is the first time that we're starting to see the Bank of Canada here kind of subtly admit through some of these headlines that they're losing control of this situation a bit. And there's a paragraph in here. It says, Caroline Wilkins, Senior Deputy Governor at the Bank of Canada, conceded in a speech on August 26th that a growing number of Canadians are losing faith in the CPI and therefore in the central bank's assurances that inflation is under control. Now look, the central bank has told us that inflation in this country is under control for as long as I can remember. And even though they've said that, I don't think very many people have ever believed that what they see with their own, they have not believed what they see with their own eyes at the grocery store, or when they go out to pay rent, or when they go out to buy a property. So even though the Bank of Canada for years has been telling us inflation's under control, in our day-to-day living, we all know prices have been going up. And if we flip over here, in one of the papers that they have on the Bank of Canada website, it's kind of shocking some of the stuff they say. Like if you look at this CPI statement here, they say the Consumer Price Index serves two main purposes. First, it is widely used by consumers, corporations, and government agencies to measure changes in purchasing power. I don't know where they're coming from with this statement, but I don't know any consumer, like I myself, do not reference the CPI to decide if prices in Canada on things that I need are going up or down. And, Nick and I, we own multiple corporations. They're not the biggest corporations in the world, granted. But, we've been doing stuff with corporations for quite some time. So we own a corporation. And I don't know, as a corporation owner, what corporations are really referencing the CPI in a day-to-day basis. Like it does have some usage for different pension plans and that kind of thing in larger corporations, but many businesses, our economy is made up of 50% of small businesses. I don't know who's referencing the CPI. So sometimes I feel like they're just living in this ivory tower. And if I look over here, part of the reason that I feel they're so off with this stuff is if you look at how they do their substitution bias, they literally document in here, and how they calculate prices is really weird. So they say things like, if chicken is going to increase considerably in price, well, then they will kind of substitute the CPI calculation with beef. Because their thinking is that, well, if chicken is really high, then us consumers will likely not buy the chicken, we'll go buy beef. And over the years, I've seen many examples of this. One example was if beef gets really expensive or steaks get expensive, maybe we'll buy hot dogs. And another example would be that if tea is getting really expensive, maybe we'll buy coffee. The tea and coffee example has been used several times with the Bank of Canada. And I always think to myself, well, if my wife wants tea and I go to the grocery store to buy tea, I'm not going to sub that out with coffee. I'll either just not buy the tea because it's so expensive, or I'm going to buy the tea. So, the fact that they use a substitution model to calculate how prices are going up in this country, to me, does not accurately reflect consumer behavior. So if they truly believe this is how consumers act, I really think it's no surprise that they get surprised that we don't believe the stats that they're putting out. So if I flip over to this next thing over here, the CIBC does a really good job at sharing some economic data. And this is their latest report, September 2nd. And if I scroll up here just to show us some of this data, this is really interesting here. They were referencing US data here, but it's the same effect is happening here in Canada in that the media is reporting that goods, so household spending on goods is it's fully recovered, like the economy on spending on goods is fully recovered. The trick with this is that household spending is not just made up of goods, it's made up of goods and services. So when you merge in goods and services together and you get the total household spending, you can see that the economy still has not recovered. And this gap in spending from consumers, and it's about the same, I know this is US data, but we're going to have about the same effect here in Canada. When this is down like this, either we're going to have a pretty terrible deep recession, or the government's going to have to step in with some more stimulus in hopes that we all go out and spend the money and try to get the economy revived. So when we see headlines that, like retail spending is up, that's often referring to the goods sector. That is not the whole picture on consumer spending at all. And when you merge it in, it looks more like this. So this is a much more accurate analysis, in our opinion, the total spending, than just looking on goods. And even if the goods is overshot here, I really don't think that combination, you can see it's overshot here, has made up the difference. It's still negative. So the overspending in goods could be temporary, and it still has not made up for the gap here. And if we look over here on some Canadian data, check this out. In Q2 of this year, it looks like compensation of employees dropped, and that's no big surprise as we all went to a shutdown and a lockdown here. But then look at the stimulus money. The government transfers, look how much money went out in various government transfers, all the different programs that Canada runs. So even though our incomes definitely fell, because of government transfers, we actually had more money. If you look at household disposable income, Canadians had more money in their pockets during the deepest economic shutdown that we've ever seen. So, if the economy doesn't have a complete recovery soon, are they going to be able to keep this level of transfer up to Canadians? So this is going to be fascinating to watch. And when you look at this must be freaking the central bankers right out. Because we talked about this in some of our economic updates that we share with Rockstar Inner Circle members. We talk about this, like the household savings rate. And if you look at the household savings rate here, it's spiked. And that's very natural. When people are petrified about what's happening in the economy and their jobs, they're going to save money. So when you put a bunch of transfer payments into the economy, but then people don't spend it, it doesn't have an economic impact. So the central banks must feel like they're losing a bit of control here, because when people are saving the money like that, that's to us a sign that we don't trust what we're seeing in the economy. We don't trust the future of the economy. So we're starting to save for a rainy day. And that is not what the central banks want. The central banks have been telling us for years, and they've continued to tell us, that low interest rates are here for a long time. Don't worry, Canadians, in an attempt to get us to feel comfortable about things and go out and spend our money. But that's not happening. And if you look at the US, you can see, actually, let me move myself over here. You can see in the velocity of money chart, so this is St. Louis Federal Reserve, the velocity of the money stock. You can see the velocity of money. It's been trending down since the NASDAQ crash, and then, the 2007-2008 financial crisis. And now with COVID, you can see the spending is just collapsing. This must absolutely be freaking out the Federal Reserve in the US and the Bank of Canada. They cannot see this happen. Like, this is going straight down. We are not going to have an economic recovery of any sort when people are just sitting on their money. They're buying necessities, of course, and we're seeing the housing market. We all need places to live. But when we're not spending money on travel and restaurants and movie theaters and the theater in general, all these other services, we are seeing this collapse. The central banks must completely be freaking out. And if I flip over to the CBC article, I want to go back up to the headline here for a second. The Bank of Canada head says central bankers must speak simply or risk losing public trust. So this is August 27th. So it's another article of them talking about how they might be losing public trust. And I don't know if they thought they had much public trust. Like, I don't know if just in the ivory tower of these central banks, they kind of walk around thinking they all have the wool pulled over our eyes. But I don't think many of us trusted what the Bank of Canada says for many years. And if you go on their Twitter feed, I don't know who else follows the Bank of Canada, but sometimes they do share some just humorous stuff on their Twitter feed. And by humorous, I mean they think it's very factual, but it's a little funny. If you want to get a laugh at some of our monetary policy, definitely follow the Bank of Canada on Twitter. But anyway, in this speech, a deputy governor here in Canada is sharing how they're kind of surprised that inflation is taking off because and his explanation is that Canadians are not spending money on things that are going down in price, like electronics and travel. And it's like, no joke, we're not spending money on things like travel specifically. And then he goes on to say, Canadians are spending their money on food. And it's like, yeah, of course we're spending our money on food. We're all sheltering in place at home and we still need to eat. And then if you're not familiar with the real estate market, he goes on to say, he pauses, and I thought he was going to say real estate, but he ends up saying cleaning products. And it's no surprise that he didn't say real estate because he doesn't want to kind of say what's happening, I think, especially in a city like Toronto, which is a big part of Canada, that the real estate market here on the outskirts of the GTA is completely on fire. And it's no surprise when you have an economic shutdown, we're all told to stay at home, that we spend all our money on food and shelter. These are primary human needs. And it's a big reason why at Rockstar, we've been focused on single-family homes on the outskirts of the GTA for over a decade now. We've always known since the last deep recession in 1990 that shelter is a need. We never foresaw this coming, but it should be no surprise to the Bank of Canada that when you tell people to stay home and not go into downtown Toronto and not go into their offices, they're going to spend money on real estate. They're going to move into a house that they really want in case we're locked down again, and they're going to spend money on food. The fact that they're surprised by this and share it like that they can't believe what they're seeing is just shocking to us. And in response, there's been a change in the way the banks are going to handle inflation. So the Bank of Canada has now matched what the Federal Reserve first came out and said, and that's why I'm sharing Powell's announcement here last week. But he said something really astonishing, and he says that the central banks are going to be more inclined to allow inflation to run higher than the standard 2% target. They're actually going to use an average over a set of years now to calculate the 2% target that the Bank of Canada has always said, and the Fed has always said that is their kind of target for inflation. We don't know any details about when they're going to start this data collection. Like, are they going to use the average from 20 years ago, data from 20 years ago and use that in the average, or just going forward? But all they've said is that they're willing to allow inflation to run hot, so run higher than 2%. And the reason that they're telling us all this is that they need inflation to grow the economy. Economic activity on its own is not going to make it happen. They need the devaluation of the dollars. They need inflation to continue to grow the economy artificially so that the debt that is growing does not continue to look bigger than the economic growth. So this is a big problem for the central banks. I've never seen them kind of dodge around like this with various statements, and now they're changing the way they calculate inflation. This is going to be fascinating going forward as the world is in a continued debt spiral. To see central banks navigate through this is going to be fascinating. They're going to depend on the governments of Canada and the US and other governments around the world to do fiscal policy movements, to do big fiscal stimulus projects in Canada, so the government will try and spur the economy on, because the central banks are almost out of ammunition. Interest rates are super low. They can go a little bit negative, it looks like. We'll see if we ever go there. But they're going to really start leaning on the governments to spend more and more money, especially now with the consumer savings rate going up. It's going to be fascinating to see these central banks put pressure on the government to say that they should be doing more fiscal things to stimulate the economy. So watch for that over the next few months. This is going to be fascinating to watch all of this play out. Hopefully you find this as interesting as we do, or you pick something up here. Until next time, your life, your terms.